Curbside with Dr. Jessica is brought to you by Sherman Abrams Laboratory, serving the clinical test needs for the greater New York area. Sherman Abrams is trusted and tested. Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica. Welcome back. Nice to see everyone again. Here with me today is Dr. Michael Kennis, a concierge doctor at work in New York City. And he's going to chat about a little bit of what he does, and we're going to go back and forth and discuss concierge medicine and all the services he offers. Hi.
Hey, thanks for the intro.
How are you today?
Very good. Excited to be here.
Wonderful. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do, and we'll just chat about everything about that.
Yeah, so I'm a family medicine specialist. However, I've never done family medicine. After leaving residency about 6 years ago, I went straight into doing locums ER, and then I would go travel and do that, and then I'd come home and I'd do part-time urgent care. About 2 years ago, I started seeing clients on a concierge basis for the purposes of Botox and filler. So it was kind of like a fun side project that I was doing. And then given the events of the pandemic and kind of a focus on people wanting personalized in-home care, that started to become what I do solely now. And we'll talk about how that happened and all the situations that made that possible.
So you have a little bit of an interesting background of doing family medicine and then going straight to ER. What made you choose that route?
So for me, it was always family medicine or ER. Mm-hmm. But I knew kind of that if I did ER, I knew that ER doctors get burned out and then they're stuck doing that. And I even met a lot of them in residency that were kind of like old residents, and they're like, I couldn't do ER anymore. It was too much, you know? And they would show me like charts. They're like, ER doctors, like either here. Mm-hmm. They're done. They can't do it anymore. And I'm like, okay, all right. Yeah. So I kind of tailored my residency to be, I used almost all my electives to do ER. So that was enough of a taste for it. I even did that as a medical student too, which gave me the flexibility of family medicine, which you are as well, mm-hmm. Where it's always great to have the clinic as not like a backstop, something you could do that's less hectic, but you could be a hospitalist, you could work in the ER, you could do anything you want, really.
I think
within reason.
Yeah, I think people and doctors in general have just taken advantage different resources out there to tailor what their medicine career is. It's not as kind of cookie cutter as what it used to be. I think we're all kind of becoming a little bit of an entrepreneur of what makes us happy. And I think that's something you've done, which is so interesting. And it takes a little bit of businessman entrepreneurship on your part to kind of get that going, because it's a little hard to get out of the stable zone, working for someone, having a solid paycheck, access to specialists, access to things, to go out of that box to create it for yourself. So tell me about have you always had that entrepreneur drive?
I think so. I've always been kind of, I guess, entrepreneurial, like kind of at the behest of my parents growing up, just being like, oh, it's snowing, you should get out there and shovel driveways. And like, oh, you're 13, you can work at a grocery store now. Yeah. But then with this, it was a little bit different because it was kind of came full circle into what got me into medicine was when I first started learning about kind of complementary alternative medicine, and antibiotics and stuff like that. And I was always a big kind of science dork. But after I got acne in high school, I started learning about medicine, in particular, like actual medicine, to try to figure out like what's going on with me. So
good now. So it seems like it worked.
Yeah, it worked out.
Everything worked out.
Yeah. So, at that time I was like, oh, maybe I should be a dermatologist.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what I was saying when I was in like high school, I think. But once I went a little more into it, I was like, A, I don't know if I want to do that for the rest of my life, like the same way as ER. And B, I don't really even know if I can get dermatology.
Yeah.
That's one of the most sought after due to the quality of life specialties.
Exactly. The nice thing about family medicine is you can kind of get a taste of a lot of things, and depending on how you hone your skills, you can, create that niche within those different compartments to really flourish. And it seems like you've done that. So with the ER training, and now you're going into Botox and injectables. Tell me how you got good at that, because I know it sounds a little strange to say, but I find, at least with experiences that I've seen, is a lot of them want to train maybe other people, but not doctors. It's hard to get actually doctor to doctor training of
Yeah.
Botox injectables. Did you just try and just get good that way? How did you do that?
Well, yeah, because doctors don't want competition.
No, they don't.
They want to train people that are gonna, help out their bottom line.
Yeah.
So during residency, I started giving, I had to give like a presentation a month, kind of like you were always giving presentations. So I started giving presentations in Botox to familiarize myself with it. And people were kind of interested because everyone's like, oh yeah, like doctors always see that as like, that's the magic sorcery out of like the clinic, clinic side of things. So I noticed that everyone was really paying close attention when I was giving the Botox presentations. So I, got to a certain point where I had a few people. One of my neighbors in New York City in the West Village was like a celebrity makeup artist, and she would do like Victoria's Secret models and like Kim Kardashian. And I told her about this, and she was like, yeah, like this is something you could do. Like you could probably pull this off. It could be a thing. And I was like, all right. And then I kind of brought that up to this other neighbor of mine, and she was like, I have a friend who's a plastic surgeon, and I grew up next to him in Buffalo, and he lives close by. You should talk to him. He's a really cool guy. And I was like, yes, please set that up. I made like 2 or 3 requests. I'm like, yes, please set that up. Nothing happened. And then finally I was like, and I knew she was looking for an apartment. And I was like, there's a rent controlled apartment in my building. And she's like, cool, set that up. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, set that up.
Yeah, I was like, give me the text. Put me on the text with, his name is Dr. Lomaney, Cyrus Lomaney. And she did, and he was a cool guy. So he kind of invited me to the office, and we met first and just, described what he'd be teaching me. And then he sent me home with like it was really nice, like a box of gloves, all the equipment, a vial of Botox. He's like, I'm gonna have my nurse show you how to draw it up, because like that's not innate either. Like you have to do that a special way. And then I came straight home, and I came straight to the makeup artist's apartment on the first floor. Her name was Meredith Baraf. And she was like, all right, cool, shoot me up. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
And she had a friend there who was also like a model. Her name was Frankie Foy. And she was like, yeah, I see Dr. Colbert on the Upper East Side, but like, let's give it a shot. And I was like, all right, cool. And they paid me.
All right.
Yeah. So
and then did you just
that's kind of how I got my feet wet. But but it was like a blessing and a curse. So, at first, like you get your training, and then it's like everything else. You have to practice and figure. Everyone does a different way. All the injectors, everyone's got their own style. So you like kind of try to avoid making mistakes. But even on the second patient, it was she was older, and you have to adjust for age and the skin, and that became an issue even on the first time. So that was like my very first lesson. Was like, it's an older person, you have to do less on the forehead, otherwise the forehead can move down a little bit. You can get drooping over the eyebrows. Not in like a bad way, but like in a way that makes it like difficult to put makeup on.
You have to give her did she get ptosis a little bit?
No ptosis, just meaning like if you have if you over freeze the forehead, then you just kind of like you lock that down.
Got it.
Where there's no move, you can't get any lift there.
Okay.
There's like a minor thing, but like that's when like the education started, because she loved it. And then like once she noticed that, then she was like, it became, that's when I'm like, okay, this is very like, it's not just, you can't just start doing it. You have to like do it, and you have to do it well, and you have to know what's going on, every age group and all the things. So then I reached out to someone in residency. He went straight into, his mother had like med spas, and he went straight into doing this. So he brought me in, and I spent a week there as well. His name was Dr. George Gavrila, and in Maryland, he's got probably 5 offices where he does the hormones and the hair and the Botox and the filler, really cool stuff. And he was great. I didn't have a car, so my mom drove me, and then he gave me product to practice on my mom, and then he gave me Botox on my face for the first time. So that was really great. And then at the end, he had me sit in with his like business manager, and he was like, so how would you feel about franchising our brand? And I'm like, oh, I didn't know this was like kind of a hard sell at the end too.
Yeah.
But that was interesting to understand, like how the model works. And yeah, and then what he was saying to me, like what the numbers were in terms of
Okay.
like what he wanted and the things that I would need if I wanted to move forward.
Okay.
So, so that was kind of a
Like a good,
learning process on the business side of things as
right.
well. Yeah.
Did that seem like a good idea for you, or did you not end up doing that?
No, just because he didn't have a presence in New York. So I think it was probably a little out of his scope. And then he wanted, it was a high upfront cost. I think he wanted 50,000. I'm sure it was negotiable to some extent, or maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
And then a large percentage of profits that would be then reinvested into marketing. But that's where it didn't translate for me, because like it would be a new arena. Like New York City would be like a new probably a little bit out of the scope.
Right.
So I was like, you know what? Well, I'll just start doing it on my own, and thank you.
Yeah.
And it's now we talk here and there, and I'm really thankful for all the lessons he gave me in the beginning.
Yeah. It's very special to get a nice week. I think we all, looking back, on the training that I had, at least with residency, it's just, you really need to take advantage of those times when you have that doctor one-on-one, because as you get older, and it's nice that, master clinicians has this now, but before that, really, you had to call the specialist, have that one-on-one training for that extra bit of knowledge. And now that we get older, it's a little bit harder to get that. And so it's nice to have these different avenues and places to have that bit of training where you need those skills.
Yeah, definitely.
So what did you find about this pandemic of how it transitioned your role into where it is now?
Yeah, so I kind of started doing the concierge stuff a year before the pandemic. So I was kind of started to amass a little bit of a clientele.
Mm-hmm.
And then the pandemic happened, and when I was kind of hitting my stride with the cosmetic medicine, and then I had stopped going to the ER, and I was in the urgent care full time, and it was crazy because people were coming in upset. No one knew what was going on.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough testing kits.
No.
Everyone wanted their antibodies tested. What was that?
That even when you had the test, sometimes they wouldn't come back in time, or in
They
the
wouldn't come back
time
in
they
time.
needed it of 72 hours. It just was hard until things got a little bit more.
And then there was criteria if you wanted to be tested that some people didn't meet, and we'd show them like 1, 2, 3, you have one, and then they get really upset, and then you're managing their fear and their personality. So then you're turning into a therapist of sorts. But during that time, all the offices except for essential ones closed, so nobody was offering Botox and fillers, and people still wanted things done because. And this was a curious thing that I was talking about with some of my friends, including Meredith, was, do people want these services, which are medical but also beauty, because they want it because they're going out to functions and are doing things, and they want to look good for other people, or is it a thing where people want to just look good for themselves too? And which we found out to be the case.
Yeah.
And then the other angle on that was people got stuck on like a Zoom like we are, so they were staring at their face. And I think if anything, that made people focus on it even more.
Yes.
So it's not like during the crazy part, I wasn't really doing it, but then like when we started to emerge out of the crazy part into the summer, I was able to have like a pretty big market share because people, like the dermatologists, were catching up on their medical patients. They weren't injecting people, so it really started to take off into the fall. And during that time was also when I was like, I don't see, like, there's not a vaccine in sight. Everyone's like, we're in this weird place where we're going out still over the summer, but like no one really knows, shake a hand, hug. I'm like, I just don't think we're over the hump. So that's when I got a contract with a local lab in Brooklyn and to start sending PCR swabs to. And he was like, we can guarantee it to you 48 hours. And I was like, cool. He's like, most cases.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you get that contract with the lab? Did you just call them?
Yeah. And it's like any other business. They were happy to have, it's not a small lab, like it's definitely like a legitimate lab with, hundreds of $1,000s of testing equipment. But I called my urgent care lab guys and he said, I'm going to refer you to this guy in Brooklyn. He's really good. And he's a rep. So he gets commission based off any business I bring in. Really a tiny one, but so he was thrilled. He came over, he put a suit on, he brought all the equipment I needed. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And then he even helped me one step further by connecting me with, that's when I was like, I took the gamble to get rapid testing equipment, which was really what accelerated things the next fall, was because I got a rapid 30-minute reverse transcriptase PCR machine. We try not to call rapid, or we were, stop calling it rapid, because it's not. It's a real RT-PCR that's really accurate, but takes only 30 minutes to run.
Yeah, the Abbott ID Now.
No.
No? Which one did you?
So that first one I got, because the Abbott ID Now was like totally like, couldn't even get your hands on that.
We had that in our office. So it's something that I got familiar with, which it was gold because everybody wanted it.
Yeah. No, it's this one called Acula.
Okay.
And now, I don't even think too many people have heard of it, but it was an actual PCR, which, if you remember, like from college when we were in like chem labs, we'd like learn how to do PCR. We'd spend like the whole day for like, like a month, like doing it, and then like finally getting PCR. And I'm like, there's no way this works. It was like it's a dock and a kit. It's like a big rectangle, different components in it. It's in like a hermetically sealed bag with a, like the temperature controlled beads. And I'm like, in 30 minutes, you take a nasal sample and you put in a buffer that starts like the cleavage process of like breaking down the DNA. And then in 30 minutes, the PCR is done. And I'm like, there's just no way. There's no way I can do this, like, outside of a lab. So when I first started running them, I started correlating it with the lab PCR.
Right.
Because essentially it doesn't really cost much. And the insurances were covering it. So I would tell the patients, the difference was the PCR we would run on our own, and the lab one, you need to gather insurance information, and it goes through insurance via the lab. Right. But like, I didn't have to charge them a fee. I just had to do the legwork.
Right.
And it was like, the correlation was insane. And I was like, this is wild.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's actually what we did in our practice. We did our rapids with a follow-up PCR when we had a high suspicion, just because you wanted to make sure you're getting no false negatives. And really that's what the issue was, is getting false negatives in the beginning stages of, even with a good PCR. Sometimes we get with a nice, send out PCR, a negative, when really it should have been a positive, and then they'd come back 2 days later and then it was positive, just because it
was too early.
It just wasn't enough there.
Not enough viral load. Yeah. So I reached a certain point where I felt comfortable not doing the lab PCR in addition, saying that this test is substantial enough to make a determination. So the drawback of it was extremely sensitive. So a lot of times it would be invalid or show no result.
Okay.
And, these testing kits were over $100 each. So it was like, I'm like, and they take 30 minutes where you're sitting, and I only had one doc because I wasn't thinking far ahead.
Right.
So when things started to pick up and the fall, people wanted to, certain people that really wanted to be in the office in the fall were like a group of 10 stockbrokers, called, and I went and did them. I had one machine. So now in half an hour each test, I was sitting there for 5 hours.
Yeah.
Waiting for the test. And it was so stressful because if one was invalid, I was like pulling my hair out, and I was like, no. And then you're like, okay, also now it's like ruining the profit margin too, to like some point it was like, now I'm not even making money. Yeah. Like, right, I'm providing a service, and then you have to figure out like, what can I do to kind of backtrack. And
yeah, I at least with the Abbott, which I was what we used, it was a finicky machine, whereas sometimes I would have to rerun it several times, which was a little frustrating at times, considering it would take 20 minutes a run, especially when you're seeing over 100 people a day. It's very hard.
Oh yeah, totally.
So it was hard dealing with the time constraints of patients coming in, but tests take a certain amount of time.
Yeah. But then what do you do with the person? You stick them in the room, you do it in the waiting room. What if they're positive, you know?
Yeah, I would send them for coffee. I would get them out, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It would create a logistical nightmare too, which eventually happened at the urgent care.
We had such a backlog of calling people back. It was hard to call people back because we had so many people coming in. So it created a whole process of making things extremely streamlined.
Right. And then, you know, it reached a point where the labs were inundated and they couldn't take, they were taking 7, 10, at a certain point, I think it was like 12 to 14 days to get a PCR test back. So at that point, what does it really matter? I think even they couldn't even run the test within a few days, so the RNA could break down, making it really the results inadequate regardless, because it's an RNA test. But B, you know, a week has passed, so a person could still have COVID when they got, you were negative a week ago, but who cares?
Yeah.
So patients were frustrated, and like I was like, this is, it's crazy. Like, what am I doing all that? Mm-hmm. So they were like, is there, do you know, they would ask me like straight up, they'd be like, do you know anywhere I could go like to get a faster test? So it just reached a certain point where I'm like, all right, I'm doing this. I'm gonna be the guy. Yeah, so I started doing it on the side, and it took like a dentist friend of mine who's got a couple kids, lives in the Upper East Side. She's in like an Upper East Side mommy's group. She had to do, what's that?
I'm in that group too.
Oh, are you?
It's a group of like 33,000 moms, you know?
That is very powerful.
It's a very powerful group. We all ask questions of each other.
Right. But like,
and post where you can get things. It's a very good group for information.
A recommendation there carries very high weight.
It does.
It was gold.
I recommend my own urgent care there many times. I got lots of people from Upper East Side mommies.
Yeah, hell yeah. Do you have a West Coast version?
They do. Yeah, I'm in that now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, there's mommy groups everywhere. They're very powerful.
Yeah. So I would go to someone's house, you know, on the Upper East Side, and then they'd immediately like also call to be like, you know, we've got this doctor that he's got a service. He'll come to you and he'll do the testing. Huh. And then like as soon as we left, the phone would be blowing up. So then now I'm like getting all these calls, you know, and trying to like schedule everyone, and then really triggering like setting up something of the healthcare system on my own. Mm-hmm. So I had a friend who does business development, and he was like, let me help you with this.
Okay.
I'm like, sure. So he came on for a little bit, and things weren't going well where he's doing his own business development at a place where they just weren't giving him what he wanted after a certain amount of time. Uh-huh. And he saw the value in this. He's like, all right. He's like, I'm coming in. I'm like, quitting my job, we're going to do this. And I was like, okay, it's on.
What did he create for you?
So he, you know, came on in the operational role. Okay. Where he took over, because I was losing my mind too. I was like, he took over scheduling. Okay. And then also what needed to happen from like, you know, a PR and marketing platform, and just handling the patients and coming up with, you know, now we need a template, like if they're negative or positive, what if they're positive, what do they need to do? Like, all these things. So he didn't have that information. So I'd have to tell him that, and then he would take that information and then handle it. So I had a friend that helped me make a website for when I first started doing the Botox filler. That was informational. So I connected him with this guy, Chromata, Adam Beasley. It's great. And you know, he started making really cool templates and then designing a new website to show what we do. So it got to the point after the fall when everyone was trying to go back to school, or not go back to school, but like Thanksgiving, holiday plans. That's when things like really turned into a frenzy. Mm-hmm. And the mommy group started hitting. So he was working around the clock. He would end up like, at the end of the day, he's like, I'm twisted in a pretzel and I'm crying now. And I'm like, all right, I'm like, hire someone. Like, hire an assistant. So he found an assistant. Mm-hmm. So that's how Zach found Courtney, through, you know, Zach's like a friend of her roommate. She was working at the Real. Uh-huh. So
did you create an EMR, and how did you choose your EMR? How did you chart patients?
So we would just, if you're not taking insurance,
Uh-huh.
you can just do paper charting.
Okay.
So that's what we did. You just
Okay.
need to take a brief history. And it was really a testing surface too. So we didn't really need like a full, we needed like a history, obviously, you know, but it didn't have to be as advanced as if you were seeing a patient for hypertension or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we only needed a few things. We needed your temperature, your oxygen, allergies, but we really kept it simple in terms of cosmetical, you know, and then obviously your travel history and stuff that would just go into
pertinent information.
Pertinent, you
know. So that's kind of the origin story of how that started. And at the same time, I was starting to do more and more Botox. My Botox rep was like, you know, she was like, you know, you should start to be like a little more business about this and have someone with you so you can, so she could sell me more Botox and filler, and also, you know, then I can get the volume discounts.
Okay.
So she introduced me to someone who's very talented in the field, and then and we said, oh yeah, maybe we can work together. We had a few lunches, and then during the pandemic, her dermatology group was cutting her hours, cutting her pay, which really wasn't fair to her. And she said, you know what? She's like, I've got enough patients that I could see. She called me and she was like, let's do this.
Okay.
And that was probably a year ago. So now she kind of heads up the, you know, her side of things. She has her own book of business. And she became a certified allergen trainer. So I'm hoping she can head up, you know, kind of a training program for other injectors under the brand name.
That's great. And
I'm sure the details of that.
A few things too along the way, considering she was a dermatology person, right? Do you guys go back and forth with collegial?
Yeah, so it's also good to, like, for me, there's, you know, you can't even anticipate like what kind of situations you're going to come up with. Like, people have difficult faces, it's also subjective, right? Because it's beauty. So like, they weren't happy with this. How do I change that? And so it was a good sounding board for me to have as a valuable resource with my growth curve as well.
That's awesome. It's very nice that you have that. It seems like a lot of the ways that you expanded your business, I think a lot of doctors, at least me personally, who was in urgent care, saw these ideas but never acted on them. So it's interesting to chat with somebody who actually acted on those ideas and created the whole carry through of, you know, creating the business that was definitely there the whole time.
And for me, it was a good kind of junction point, because we talked about like burning out in the ER, but even in the urgent care, I think there's a burnout. And all this was happening at like the 5.5 year mark for me, where I was like, you know, you're around the same people every day for 12 hours, and they could see like I was like kind of like not starting to lose it, but it was just like not as fun anymore. You know, it used to be really exciting to like have some weird cases pop up and then spend half the day like treating like UTIs and sinus infections and pneumonias, and then like some crazy stuff and like meet everyone. But it started to become a lot of a grind when this was happening. So by the time in December of 2020, when I was like, all right, I'm gonna have too much to handle on the business, the entrepreneurial side of things, I think. And there's enough cash flow coming in from the COVID testing and a decent amount from cosmetics. I'm like, I think I can kind of cut the cord. And it was kind of hard to do the whole, it was 9 months of COVID too. So I was kind of like fried from dealing with that. And you can also imagine being in New York City, or you were obviously, when New York was coming in and being stressed out about their health and a viral pandemic.
It was an interesting time, you know, interesting time. It made you think about what made you happy. And I think that's what a lot of people did, is just like, where do I want to go with my career? And for some people, it was hard for their career. Some people, it opened up doors. There was a big gamut at play of what was happening with people's lives during the pandemic. So it's interesting to see where you took it. And I find it very reassuring that you were able to find your way and figure out how to do things. And I'm learning from this discussion because, you know, it takes a little bit of, I don't know, I guess, proactive gusto to try those things. So I applaud you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Was there any problems that you found along the way that was hard or that you're still dealing with?
Hmm. Just finding the right people. It
Right.
has to happen like organically. They have to be in a place where they want to do it, and
Yeah.
they believe in the vision. So um, yeah, I had to get the right people. Basically, that was the hardest part. But once that comes together, um, the managing part is a lot. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like now that I'm managing, getting deals
Mm-hmm.
and having the overseeing the operations with director of operations, um, seeing the clients,
Mm-hmm.
making sure the business is healthy. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, now I'm looking back and I'm like, oh, I had it pretty nice when I was at the urgent care.
Yeah.
And they had snacks in the back room for us.
Yeah, it's different when you go into the office, and I think that's where a lot of us doctors kind of get, happy there because there is such a security within that day and within those hours. You know what you're getting, you know what you're not getting, and you can provide for your family or your home depending on how much you work. Whereas when you create your own business, it's a little bit all of a question mark depending on what is at play during the week or that month or the environmental things that are happening in the world.
Right. So then, yeah, so there's two things that come out of that. So it's like, one, now that I've been out of like traditional medicine role for 6 months, it's like, do I miss doing traditional medicine a little bit? Do I want to do that? And do I feel bad about it? And then um, the second part is just, as we said, just kind of figuring out where to go from here and where to pivot now that the big part of the business was COVID. And thankfully, we've pretty much turned the corner with all the vaccines that came out. So it's like, now where do we go from here?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question mark, but it's also exciting. So,
Mm-hmm.
there's different ways to look at it. And when you meet people in New York City that are everyone's, at least consider themselves to be business savvy, most are, but everyone likes to offer their advice, and some even like take us out to lunches, and they're accomplished business people for the most part.
Yeah.
So it's like, they all offer their insights, and it's like, well, they're like, you should like do some market research, and you could poll everyone, all your clients, and ask what's the next service they would want from you.
Mm-hmm.
But like, also you can just kind of trust your gut too,
Right.
you know, um, because it's like, do I want to spend the time and money like
I think,
figuring out what people like, and then it
yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work also.
Well, the one thing about polls is it's what they want. It's not what you want. So I think, where do you want your medicine to go is a big question. Like, what do you miss from your daily life? So if you miss the primary care, I think we chatted about this earlier, then you add that platform. And because at the end of the day, it's your practice, it's your career, and you'll hopefully invite the services that other people want, but at the end of the day, it's what makes you happy, and what you're practicing needs to make you happy. So if you're practicing what others want, then it might not correlate to what makes you happy.
Right, because people can always tell if you're doing something that you enjoy doing.
Exactly.
So, and I think that's why I worked with the beauty component, because in
Mm-hmm.
taking it full circle, what I talked about earlier, now I'm like, when I was a little pimply faced high schooler that was really unhappy and wanted to learn about medicine, now I'm helping other people kind of feel good and look good about their skin.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily I'm not a dermatologist per se. So there's that, it's kind of, what's that called? Like a sublimation kind of component
Yeah.
for me, like, which makes me enjoy it more. But yeah, I think what I do kind of miss family medicine, and I think of all the people that trained me and all the, in residency, all my preceptors, and it was fun to have that continuity in a different way as well. So I think that is something that some of the clients would say, hey, if you want to do that, I would sign up. And so now it's building a platform for that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, speaking with a friend in real estate, and he's like, you're following the market trends too, like because you're a businessman now. So I'm like, kind of. So now that like New York City's open and people are like, it's pretty wild here now. People thought New York City was dead, but it's not. And everyone wants to get back to pre-pandemic in a big way. So
Right.
it's like, what's the next service that we're suited to do that we could be like valuable? And I also have a very smart medical assistant who's going to be a doctor one day, and is very tech savvy, as most 23-year-olds are. So we're
Yeah.
considering having a concierge STD testing platform.
Right.
And then it's like, if you're going to do that, you might as well do post-exposure prophylaxis and potentially PrEP.
Yeah.
So that's another fun angle that I think people might like, but it's not necessarily going to spread like COVID, the virus, or COVID. Hey, I've got a guy, that'll come test you for COVID. This requires probably now advertising.
Right.
So now it's another, something to think about, but it's fun. That's the fun part. It's kind of a process and a learning curve of
Well, I'm
business
excited.
side of things.
This is exciting. All these are great avenues to go in. So I can't wait to kind of chat again and see where you're at once you've kind of landed your feet on what makes you happy. I had a great time discussing all these topics with you, Dr. Kennis. This was really interesting. I learned so much and I enjoyed my time chatting with you. And I can't wait to explore what you do next. And then we'll kind of come back and see where we're at with your career in the future. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. And also, it was helpful for me to kind of talk through these things and help kind of self-evaluate and analyze where I'm at. So it will be exciting to see where the next kind of 3 months, 6 months, 1 year will take us. So hope to talk with you again soon.
Yeah, we'll chat soon. So thank you. Bye, everyone.